When it comes to strange and unexplained interactions with creatures possibly from out of our world, we have many different examples to choose from. Times when people thought that they saw something fly across the sky, others who believed that they were abducted by aliens and even spent time on their craft. Unexplained marks on the ground, lapses in memories, time slips, you name it, and there is someone somewhere that has attributed it to an interaction with aliens. But today, we're looking into what is arguably the most well-known example that has ever existed. One that became the absolute poster child for alien encounters, inspired numerous films, TV series, and other media, and is still hotly debated up to this very day. Welcome to Roswell. Roswell is a city located in New Mexico with a current population of just under 50,000 people. It covers around 77 square kilometers, which is in heathen units. So in the Blessed Lord's units, that is 29.72 square miles. And is famous for its university, minor league baseball, but more than anything else, the incident that occurred there in 1947. In June of that year, a rancher named W.W. Brazel, who also went by Mac, discovered various pieces of debris strewn across his property. He would collect each of these pieces, consisting of rubber, wood, tinfoil, and various other materials, and then bring them into his home, confused about what exactly they were or where they had come from. He would report his findings, probably with a fair amount of confusion, to authorities at one of the local air bases, but only after nearly a month had passed. This was due to his remote location and lack of a telephone or radio. Unbeknownst to him at this point, this was right in the middle of an ongoing, unexplained bunch of events of flying disc sightings both in the region and beyond. There had been multiple reports from eyewitnesses that stated they had seen objects in the sky that were something entirely different from the normal aircraft and celestial bodies. What Mac Brazel found on his ranch would add fuel to the fire, physical proof of something unexplained, not only flying overhead but actually coming down onto the earth and landing. Something that would fan the flames of this burgeoning mystery far beyond what anyone could have expected. One of the factors that made this story immediately much bigger than it already was would have to be the way that it was reported in an official press release. For some reason, officials at the air base released a statement that said they had recovered debris from the ranch that was from a flying disc. The exact way the witnesses from elsewhere had described these unknown objects in the sky up until now. These various sightings had been growing in number and had been covered in the press, with the total number of specific reports somewhere around the 800 mark. With the increasing public interest in all things unknown flying across the sky, and with the Cold War in full effect, there were even cash rewards being offered for anyone that could provide this physical evidence of whatever it was that suddenly appeared overhead. This press release from the RAAF, or RAF, on the 8th of July reads as follows, and I don't know if it's RAF, I'm gonna call it RAF, but it read as followed. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chaves County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Maj Jesse A. Marshall of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Given how specific this release was and the mention of a flying disc being recovered, it was little wonder that the center of focus of all things UFO related became firmly centered on Roswell. Members of the team that were sent to the ranch in order to recover the debris claimed that even they were told specifically that it was from a flying saucer that had landed there. When they arrived, they took a number of photographs at the location with the unknown debris in hand. It wouldn't be long before these were circulated in the press, one that was already focusing on the possibility of unknown flying objects, and to a public that was slowly becoming primed to the idea that there may be something out there. It wouldn't take long for the armed forces to come out with an explanation, stating that the debris was clearly part of a weather balloon that had crash landed, but for those who believed, it was arguably already too late. Despite the debris being transported away for further examination, all future references to it by officials were as part of a weather balloon, and while many will have accepted this as the most plausible explanation, when it was combined with the seemingly endless sightings that were occurring, others were more skeptical. They believed that the government was hiding the true nature nature of what had been found, and they were determined to find out more. In the intervening years, a number of various conspiracy theories would take hold, ones that were at least tangentially related to Roswell. One of the most prominent was the idea of a secret hangar that was operated by the military, and this was where they kept and investigated anything top secret and groundbreaking, such as possible alien life. On the back of this, some began to suggest that there was far more than just weather balloon debris recovered in Roswell. Some stated that they had in fact found living aliens at the crash site, and that this secret hangar was one of the locations where authorities were likely to have whisked them off to in order to experiment on them and better understand how they functioned. Books, articles, and other forms of media were published in the years after the fact, covering every single possible facet of the incident itself and different explanations that were offered. Some claimed to have interviewed multiple eyewitnesses. Some spoke to people that had physically been seen there and also handled the wreckage recovered from the site. And others made claims about recovery of alien bodies and strange symbols displayed on what they claimed was a clear alien craft. A local mortician named Glenn Dennis would claim that the Air Force Base where the debris was recovered actually phoned him up on a number of occasions to ask for information on how to preserve remains. Questions that he heavily implied were related to them possibly having found living or recently deceased bodies at the site of the crash. His accounts would be featured in many of the subsequent documentaries and TV specials that were made about the incident. And it's fair to say at this point that even amongst those who are firm believers in the UFOs and alien life, there is not much to be had in the way of a consensus really when it comes to Roswell. Even leaving aside for a moment the opinions of skeptics who fully accept the official narrative, or at least most of it, there appears to have been differing degrees of belief as to what actually happened that day and what was recovered. Some people believe that there were alien bodies recovered that were either preserved alive for experimentation or that their remains were treated and investigated for really the ability to further understand where they were or where they came from. Pretty much all the important things that you want to know. The Zeta Reticulans, I guess you could say. Others believe all of this talk of bodies to be entirely fictional, or perhaps even deliberately fabricated in order to make their skepticism of the official story appear more ridiculous. Some believe that the debris that were, well, I guess it's debris, that's gonna make somebody angry. It always does. That was photographed and distributed in the press is not a full and fair representation of what was actually found that day, instead believing that there were more futuristic metal materials used in the real flying saucer, complete with markings of an unknown alien language, and that the photo op and the withdrawn official statement were simply tools to throw the public off the scent. And many of the writers that have covered the incident, even some who were skeptical of the extraterrestrial angle, were not entirely convinced by the explanation offered regarding this basically just being a weather balloon. I mean, it's swamp gas or a weather. These are just the classics, dude. And I guess they're the classics because of this era, but as time would pass, it was clear that people were correct to mistrust the official explanation. But maybe not for the reason that you might initially think. The theories on what exactly happened came thick and fast in the aftermath, and as the news and photographs of the unexplained object began to circulate further, interest in Roswell and whatever had landed there only would continue to grow. The authorities came out with their own explanation relatively early, and as we have covered, it sucks. They claimed that what was seen in the photographs and spotted by witnesses was nothing more than a weather balloon that they had sent up. While some members of the public seemed to agree with this, there were many more that were dubious about whether this was in fact correct. After some time had passed, the government would eventually give a slightly more factual and full account of what was found. At that time, they had been in the process of conducting an operation codenamed Mogul, and that was designed to fly microphones on high-altitude balloons. The wreckage that had landed in Roswell was an example of one of these secret balloons that had flown off course and then crash landed. Due to the sensitive nature of the project, basically tying a microphone to a balloon, since they were being developed in order to secretly detect Soviet atomic bomb tests, they were forced to claim that it was simply a weather balloon in order to better cover their tracks. They even offered up the air bases where they were being launched from and the times and dates of their deployment, some of which matched actually very closely with both the unexplained sightings and the debris that had been recovered from the ranch. The other theories, and the ones that certainly seem to grip the imagination of the general public a little more readily, was that this was not quite as simple as it first appeared. That there was something far beyond human knowledge and technology, especially when viewed against the backdrop of numerous sightings that had seemed to have been happening. It was easier for many to believe that this was something a little more unknown and otherworldly that had actually landed at this ranch. After all, If only one person had reported something odd, then there was always the possibility of misidentification or hoax, but multiple hundreds over a large area, and now with physical proof, that was always something that's going to be a little harder to explain away. But before we get into the various explanations that have been offered and try to assess how plausible they all are, it's worth mentioning a couple of other similar instances if there is something that is, there that might interest you. And if you're after all things alien and unexplained, then there are a few videos that have already been made on this channel that might suit you quite well. You could try the secret alien base that was said to be hidden underground in the very same state as Roswell. If the people who believe this story are correct, then a secret location deep in the desert. This has been a hub for years that houses alien life, but they are not just living there quietly. They have been engaged in warfare for years with both other forms of alien life and even against us humans. It has been alleged that we have been sending special forces and troops for a long time in order to try and maintain control over the life forms and their technology deep under the sand and rock. While it may be a suggestion that seems faintly ridiculous to anyone with a skeptical viewpoint, there is no denying that it really is an interesting topic. Or we have covered the Rendlesham Incident, another close encounter with alien life, but this time out in East Texas. Two women and a boy were driving along a fairly quiet road and they saw a strange object flying in the sky above them. When they pulled over to examine it closer, it came down so that it was hovering not far above the tree lines. They described it as being nothing like any known aircraft and it emitted a strange glow. In addition, it was giving off so much heat that the roof of their vehicle became hot to the touch and some of the plastic interior softened so much that a handprint remained visible in the multiple days after the encounter. Becoming fearful, they re-entered the vehicle and then fled, but not before they saw a number of black helicopters escorting the strange object away from the scene. In the immediate aftermath, they suffered sickness and vomiting, which then they attributed to the encounter, and the two women would go on to develop severe health issues over years. They associated this with the encounter, and an investigation was carried out, and despite no notably higher radiation levels coming back from the scene and the government denying that there was any military presence in the area, the women remained adamant that this was an encounter with something out of this world. Or how about across the pond? This is basically England's Roswell, which is known as the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Not far from a RAF base called Woodbridge, a security patrol was on base and they saw multiple lights falling from the sky and landing in the nearby Rendlesham Forest. They entered the forest to investigate, believing that it was an aircraft that had crash landed or got into trouble, and instead saw a glowing metal object covered in lights of various colors. By the time the authorities went back to investigate, there was no sign of the aircraft and instead just indents in the ground that could have been indicators of it landed. They would still take radiation readings from the alleged landing site later and find them higher than expected, which believers use as proof that there truly was something out there that night. This remains one of the UK's most divisive UFO tales, with skeptics explaining it away in a way that, well, at least that can, be explained away, and believers holding it up as the gold standard for solid proof of extraterrestrial life. Other ones you might enjoy, the Phoenix Lights, which were a series of strange sightings over Phoenix, or the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, where a group of people claimed to have engaged unknown alien life forms hours-long gun battle. And for any of the other diehard alien enthusiasts, another topic that we might look into here in the near future would be the one other location that could reasonably be argued, as well as known as notorious as Roswell, and this is a facility in Nevada, or Nevada, depending on how you want to talk about it. It's known as Area 51. I mean, everybody knows Area 51, and depending on who you ask, it is either a top secret location where alien life is discovered, investigated, or experimented on, or nothing more than a flight test center where the government and armed forces work on top secret technology. But before you check those out, let's look into how plausible each of the theories about Roswell's incident is. So when it comes to looking at the plausibility of each of these explanations that have been offered in the Roswell incident, this is definitely a case where what you choose to believe will definitely color your opinion. There are many who will buy the official explanation wholesale, and those people are giant nerds. Listen, man, I'm just gonna jump in here real quick. Typically, when it comes to the government, they're the government. Like, right? Are they really gonna tell you everything that they know? Probably not. I mean, that's just, and there's a reason for it, right? It's not just like they're sitting there rubbing their hands together like, haha, we're not gonna tell the public anything. But think about it, really. If there was something out there and they told the general public that there is something out there, everybody would panic. And then you have at least in the US, what is it, like 360 million people who are like, holy, like you would get basically every religion describing them as demons. You get people who are not religious describing them as like either great things, but then even within those groups, you have people who are like, well, they're gonna conquer us, so we need to panic. Absolute chaos. cats and dogs living together, that whole scenario. So you really got to kind of take this with a grain of salt. While you don't have to believe what the government says, and personally, I take everything the government says a little bit skeptically, but at the end of the day, they're just regular people who are trying to keep this thing running, right? So it's probably best if they don't mention everything that happens, I guess is the best way to put it, because a lot of people could not handle that information. So that's probably why they aren't mentioning everything that's happening, just as a heads up. But then again, now everybody's gonna call me a government, apologist or something like that. Anyways, we'll get more into kind of a discussion of this here in a minute, but let's get back to it. So people will look at the explanation offered by the government at the time and the information that has been released over the years that have passed since, and they'll be entirely satisfied that it is exactly what they said it was. After all, what would there really be to gain from covering up something as groundbreaking and shocking as a crash landing of an alien spacecraft? Not really what's to be gained, what's to be lost by telling people, I believe. So they also might ask, why would they be so unwilling to offer the truth to the public who were only demanding more clarity as time passed? And most pressingly of all, if this were all true, why would they ever allow the likes of whistleblowers and leaked information to see the light of day? After all, if your whole plan is to keep something secret, there is no benefit at all to even letting these sort of rumors and evidence out in the public sphere, where they will do nothing but draw attention to the situation and bring more eyes onto it. Most people, it would be fair to say, are somewhere really in the middle when it comes to Roswell. They recognize that there was something very odd about what had happened that day and can see the evidence that there was certainly some sort of effort to keep whatever it was secret. But whether they believe it was an alien spacecraft is less clear. Perhaps it was a weather balloon or something as innocuous as that. Or it is more likely that it was some sort of stealth technology that was being developed and built in secret, and this is the reason for the inability of the authorities to be entirely honest and open about precisely what happened. Regardless of people's opinions, the fact that the authorities decided to lead off with an incorrect assertion initially, claiming it to have been a weather balloon, has led most being at least a little skeptical about anything else that they claim about it since. After all, there is no denying that it hurt their credibility somewhat when they were not upfront about the situation from the start, which they were developing technology very likely. They couldn't be upfront about it. So the Roswell incident do in particular to just show how famous it became and the sheer amount of media that has been centered around it is more prone than most events to occur on here to at least having the waters muddied at least a little. So with so much coverage from so many angles over the decades at this point, it becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, to begin to filter out which parts are entirely fair and factual. With the official account being an admitted cover-up of sorts, at least in the beginning, it managed to reinforce the belief that many have years now that officials can and will do anything they can do to kind of hide the truth from the public. And it is cited by many as the genesis of the belief that not only is there something out there, but that those in charge already know about it and they're from us. Even these splits within the camps of those that believe make it difficult to code and fairly assess. Everyone on every side appears to have their own belief and their own version of the truth. And with just how much information there is available now and how many kind of derivative pieces of media have been created, this is probably the best example we could actually have to kind of offer a situation where you just truly have to make up your own mind. So there you have it, the world famous Roswell incident. And it won't matter what you choose personally, or what you believe in this case. It won't matter what evidence you choose to support. In the end, this is one event regardless of whether it is true or the explanation for it has grown into something that is much bigger than the original incident could have ever been. It captured the imaginations of millions and launched almost an entire niche section of the entertainment industry. And while the skeptics will believe the official version of truth, and believers will always point to something more going on that has never been adequately fathomed out as of yet. For better or for worse, and entirely independent of the truth of the situation, Roswell is a name that is now and forever associated with alien life. And no matter how little you happen to believe it, if you ever find yourself around there, we can guarantee that you'd be keeping at least half an eye in the sky above you at all times. As ever, however, let us know what you think down in the comments. And if you want to suggest anything, we'll kind of fully unpack that in the future as well. So here's where I always like to break in on this topic and just kind of talk to you for a second. A, you're a nerd. B, you're a dork. Now, so essentially, two things I want to discuss. The first one is, does the government actually tell you everything they're doing. Absolutely not. And they can't, because there's other governments in the world that they want to keep that information from. The reality is that you need to remember the government is not lizard people. They're not some weirdos or something ridiculous kind of hive mind creature. They're just regular people who are also potentially being presented with information, and they're also trying to protect information such as what the government is building that they don't want other countries to kind of take, because you don't necessarily know, like you can have top secret clearance and all this stuff, but you don't know who those people are talking to, and kind of become an issue. And if you came out to the general public, like, yeah, we found an alien ship, the first thing that's gonna happen is that base is gonna be inundated with probably people who don't need to be there, who are working for other government agencies. So is it nefarious, the reason that they keep this information away from regular people? No, I don't believe it is. I think it's more just like, yeah, we have to protect our own nation from potentially people of other countries who might want that information, and then that could turn against us. So no, the government is never really gonna tell you everything that there is about a situation, which is why I also think it's foolish to believe the standard narrative, because it's like, okay, if you fully distrust the government, right? Understandable. But if you fully believe the government, it's understandable, but both are basically the same sides, or excuse me, different sides of the same coin. It's probably more in the middle of what you're actually explaining. Now, here's the other part of this I wanted to talk about. 1947 and 1950s, you gotta remember a lot of nuclear tests were being conducted. Now, you have some possibilities here. Were other things being talked about at that particular point in time, just to cover up the fact that these tests were being conducted? Or is it possible, and this is completely out there, this is just Roanoke tales ad-libbing here. If you were to come across a species that was rubbing sticks together and creating fire, you'd be like, okay, yeah, they're pretty intelligent. I mean, you know, they're able to do these things. That's cool. But when you come across a species that literally splits an atom, right? That's when you're like, okay, that's different. While other species that may be out there are building fires or, you know, small camps, typical tribal kind of nature, I guess is the best way to put it. Once you split an atom, and that means you have a fundamental understanding of the universe around you, that might be a point when any other species will take a look at you and be like, okay, that particular species is interesting because they were able to find out something about the universe that otherwise they may not have known, or others might not know. So it may just be kind of one of those, not filters, but checkpoints on like a list somewhere of like, okay, which species should we really care about? Which ones should we watch? Because ultimately, humanity is still very young. We haven't really been around that long, especially like the hardware of our brains has been the same, but the software hasn't, I guess is the best way to put it. So when you have our race, which is relatively young, dealing with something as powerful as nukes, it might be kind of a question of, does another, like if you had, let's say, a 5-year-old who figured out how to fire a force multiplier, you might want to teach him how to use that, right? You don't want to let them just go off on their own and do it. Because remember, around this point, humanity was very nuke happy, right? I'm pretty sure during the Korean War, was it MacArthur? I think it was MacArthur. It might have been Marshall. I can't remember the name. He wanted to basically nuke a border around North Korea to keep China out. That is insane. And ever since then, we haven't used nukes because it's like, ooh, yeah, these things, not only are they not exactly the greatest things that we've ever created, but they're super powerful and they have the possibility to basically wreck every ecosystem. So if in fact aliens did become interested in the 1940s, specifically of humanity, it may literally be because we figured out nuclear technology and we figured out how to create this. But hilariously, rather than use it for energy, we used it for weapons first, which not ideal, but humanity being humanity, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. So is it possible around this era, aliens became more interested in our species? Yes, it's entirely possible because of what we have created. Now, is Roswell known as the alien capital of the world, I guess? Probably. Also, just like, were they working? Was it aliens? Were they working on something? Everything here is possible. I don't necessarily always believe what the government says immediately because there's always the concept that they don't really need to tell you everything. And in a lot of ways, a lot of people can't handle the real truth. And that's just the way it is. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. This was kind of, I know at the end here, I always put in my opinions. I hope you guys enjoy that aspect. I don't know if you do. Let me know what you think down in the comments about me also putting in my opinion. But I want to thank my patrons real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Invictus Echo, Monkey Man, and Strungle. Thank you guys. At the Eyewitness event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. At the second-hand accounts tier, we have Bianca, Crippling Depression Gaming, Fred Rush, Stutz, and Troy. The rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support as well. It goes a long way towards helping out. So thank you. All right, that's going to do it for me. Everyone enjoyed, and we'll see y'all in the next one.